Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for our time together where we're going to affirm and think about it's okay to not be okay. My name is Hamida Bagarathi, and I'm going to be spending time with you today. And I support our programs, and I'm joined by Yodit Mesman Johnson, new CEO and president, and Carly Frederick, our programs associate. So as we move into our space together today, and we're leaving behind the places and spaces that you were in just a few moments ago, whether that's kind of in your home office, working away, kind of with children or pets or beloved humans, let's all collectively take a deep breath in and then slowly out to transition us into this space. I'll share a little bit of grounding for centering justice. We started out a little over a year and a half ago now as a program at the very beginning of the pandemic to really amplify essential, crucial BIPOC voices and uplift the significance of communities of color in not only weathering the pandemic in light of capitalism and white supremacy that permeates so many of our lives and so many places and spaces in our lives, but also to create and make space and engage us and join us to dream about and help build a more inclusive and equitable future. Over the course of our time, we've invited visionaries, storytellers, and healers that will interrupt the status quo and also help us to interrupt the status quo and inspire us to believe in and act to create a more just and thriving society. During our time together today, myself and my colleagues will be in conversation with our speakers, and we'll also close with invitations and demands from our speakers for action on our parts. And really just so thankful today to have Allandra Bulger, executive director of COACT and a hip hop artist, and Camille Jones, a practicing therapist and owner for Healing for Wholeness LLC and Race Dialogue Facilitator with us today to share ways we can hold and heal ourselves during these times. So I will pass it off to Aryodit to ground us a little bit on today's conversation further.
Thanks, Amita. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being with us. And never mind this growling dog in the background. In so many ways, the universe is telling us that things are not okay. Climate and weather occurrences, attacks on our reproductive rights, mandates for returning to work and school, and sadly, politicized healthcare and social protections. Though today's topic might seem a little somber, this idea of not being okay, to me, it's about reclamation, about being able to speak and sit in our truths, and that as a liberatory practice. I often describe dominance and white supremacy and other forms of oppression as the waters we're swimming in. We're in it and we're not always aware, sort of like fish, that we're in this system and these systems. And we sort of put our game face on, we go fight and we never stop. I personally have been fighting with the myth of the Black superwoman my entire adult life. That woman can do it all. She can hold it all. She pushes through. She has, and I have, labored for this country. And it wasn't just the country, Black women in my family taught me to work. I watched them work. And part of my personal journey has been untethering my work from my worth. I'm also learning what it means to create a culture of care at New. Our team, I am exhausted. It's palatable. I can feel it. And even though we're pushing through, it is having an impact on our relationships and our culture. Maybe you're noticing that too in your organization. That noticing compelled me to do something to signal to the team that I care about them and also to hold myself accountable for care. I care about them beyond their work. Their worth matters to me. This Friday, in fact, we'll have our first mental health day where I'm closing the entire organization and folks are encouraged to rest. And we'll have a small pool party at the end of the day because I like a party. Rest does include a party for me. And in July, we adopted our flexible time off program. As of that time, employees must take 3 weeks off throughout the year, and are encouraged to take additional time throughout the year as they need it. And it's rooted in trust and an understanding that they'll meet their work obligations and honor our commitment to the public and our mission. When I think about who's inspired me to think this way and to act this way, Allandra Bulger is one of those people. Her personal practices and witnessing to me and other leaders of the importance of putting on our own oxygen masks first, and the way she nurtures her team are why I couldn't think of another leader in my sphere of influence to help guide our conversation today. And I've been delighted to meet Camille and to get to know of her work, her decision to start her own practice, I believe also a liberatory act, and the ways Camille helps us think about wellness and boundaries and our mental health. So today we're going to sit with not being okay and the beauty of acknowledging that and of hearing and learning together what it means to move towards health and wholeness and wellness. So let's meet our guest, y'all. Carly?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Yodi. We always want to invite our speakers into this space and bring their whole selves. And so in that spirit, I'd like to ask each of you, Camille and Allandra, to just tell us about the communities and identities that you are drawing upon as you enter today's space.
So it's like that double Dutch hesitation of like who jumps in first. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. First and foremost, supreme gratitude for the opportunity to be in conversation today, as well as to be welcomed into this beloved community. I'm Allandra Bulger. I entered this space with a number of hats on. First and foremost, as a Black woman, as a wife, to a partner who is, my mirror in unlearning and relearning and healing. As a creative, as a hip hop artist, as a writer, as someone who uses that modality to not only make sense of the world, but also to express emotions, a whole range of emotions. I enter as an educator and a learner, always on the journey of learning and being inquisitive about the world and others' experiences. I enter this space as a surrogate parent to my siblings who are now adults, but I still worry about them as if they are my own children. I enter as the executive director of a nonprofit organization, a startup, and I bring, Yodi, thank you for the comments around the type of culture that we've really been trying to facilitate at COAC, but also a lot of pressure, right? A lot of pressure around something very new, a lot of pressure around managing and leading a team during these trying times. So I bring that in as well. And then I bring in the identity as an emerging nature enthusiast, which is one of the ways that I've, during the pandemic in particular, sought to center myself, to process my emotions. When I'm not okay, Yodi will tell you, I get out on the trail, I get to the river. And so I enter this space bringing those identities in.
And hello, my name is Camille Jones. I'm so eternally grateful to be here as well. The identities that I'm bringing into the space today, number one, a Black person and a woman, so a Black woman. I also bring in my experiences as a daughter, a sister. I'm gonna call it a momty, so auntie and mom put together, to my nieces and nephews. Additionally, I'm a therapist. And lastly, and I think this is important as well, is I'm someone who has a lot of invisible illnesses. So I have diabetes, I have serious depression, I would probably say dysthymia, so persistent depression. So that's what I'm bringing into the space today.
Thank you so much, Allandra and Camille, for sharing a bit of yourselves with us and what you're bringing into the space to sort of center and ground us in what brought us together today. I'll share really our blurb that we were really thinking of. So it's been an incredibly challenging year and a half. How can we honor the truth of this moment in time, how hard it has been, and also trust that it's okay to be okay to not be okay? Join us in exploring how to untangle ourselves from a culture rooted in objectivity and denial. Let's transform the ways we view wellness and what it means to truly care for ourselves in this current climate. So in that vein, would love to hear from Camille and Allandra to start us off here. What does not being okay mean to you? Perhaps how are you in this moment? What's real and true for you right now?
I think for me, not being okay means sitting with whatever pain and discomfort I'm experiencing in any moment and really honoring that. We live in a culture and a society that as soon as we see a problem, we want to solve it. We want to rid the problem as if having a problem is inherently a bad thing. And I often use pain as information that tells us when maybe something is needed or maybe there's care that needs to be tended to. And in this moment, I think I'm feeling nervous. I would just name that. And I'm feeling just so happy to be in a space full of people that are embracing this work.
Yeah, I think for me, one of the things that I've been trying to break the habit of is answering that question by saying, I'm okay. Right? Like just the generic kind of response to that question. But I am well in this moment. I'm actually traveling right now, which is one of the ways in which I take care of myself. And so I'm in the city of Pittsburgh this week. And I'm doing lots of exploration, and it's a solo trip. And that's very intentional time to, check in with myself, to hear my own voice, to hear God's voice. And so in this moment, I feel great. What does it mean to not be okay? I think particularly during this moment, it's being honest. Yodi, what you said about the Black superwoman myth really resonated with me because, I grew up in a household where, verbally we were encouraged to express what we feel. And, both my parents are writers, so I got that from them and writing how I felt. But then I also saw other things modeled. And I was also raised to be like, uber accomplished, super independent, right? And there are moments in my life where that approach has certainly served me well, right? But it's not the best approach in this moment. And so when I think about it through the lens of honesty. I think about being able to also have the vulnerability to communicate that, and picking and choosing what, who that's shared with. It doesn't mean that it has to be shared with everyone. Everyone is not receptive. Everyone is not a safe space. But being able to have folks in my community, in my corner, that I can share what I'm really grappling with is important.
You made me think about, I was talking to a girlfriend recently, and we were talking about our mothers, and growing up in a house where I never wanted for anything, and I recognize and acknowledge that for some people that was the case. They didn't have their basic needs. I did have my basic needs, but that was in large part because that's what my mother focused on, was our needs, right? So the kind of home water, if I use that analogy again, was like, meet your needs, right? But it wasn't a space where mom got a chance often to cultivate her wants, right?
Yeah.
And so my friend was sharing, and it really resonated with me, and you made me think about it when you talk about kind of how we grew up. I think part of that superwoman thing was because my mother literally made all our, got all our needs met, right? And that's what I learned to do. And then it translated into meet family needs, meet work needs, meet the needs of a partner, meet the needs of my community, meet the needs of, right? And so you surface that for me. And I wonder if, as we're thinking and talking today, just in what ways do we orient towards being able to express what we long for, what we want?
Yeah, and I think, just to piggyback off of that a little bit, what you bring up for me is the notion of like being in survival mode, right? So like if I think about myself and that, my mother raising me to be super independent came from a place of survival mode, right? I come from a lineage of women who unfortunately have died prematurely. So if you look across my lineage, I have a great-grandmother that passed prematurely, grandmother that passed prematurely, mother that passed prematurely. And because of that, like my mother was so intent on ensuring that like if she wasn't here, right, like I would have all the tools that I needed to be strong, to be independent, to take care of the family if the family needed to be taken care of. And unfortunately, that reality came true. So that's why I say in some instances, that perspective has served me to be able to survive. But in the space of thriving, in the space of wholeness, in the space of well-being, it's important that we explore and employ other modalities for wellness and for well-being.
I'm appreciating the moment of quiet there, particularly as we honor our ancestors that transitioned. My mom transitioned young too, right? So I want you to tell me a story. You surfaced and we just surfaced like conflict, and in our planning, we were sort of talking about, you know what, Camille, did we hear from you?
Yeah,
I think we did.
I answered the question first, and then Allandra went.
Oh, good. I don't want to miss an opportunity. I just wanted to talk about like how you locate or center around some of this conflict that comes up for us. Both of you talked about noticing in your bodies and in your continents, like when things were off, and the pressures that Allandra shared of leading a startup. Can you talk about conflict and how you know who you are? How do you know that? Where do you know it? Can you talk about that a little bit? Where do you feel this tension, these tensions that we spoke of?
I tend to carry so many tensions in my shoulders. And so anytime I'm feeling stressed or even unsure of something, just kind of that gut, like, I don't know, it will show up in my shoulders. Like specifically, I'm noticing at this point, my left shoulder will be on fire. And kind of the intuition that I'm doing something right, I often feel it very strongly in my heart. So not like the structure of my heart, but just kind of like in my heart and my soul and my spirit. And I'm often, and I think we talked about this in our planning meeting, but I'm often kind of leaning to the body to kind of tell me, okay, am I doing the right thing? Do I need to just let it sit and not make a decision right now? Because that's important too. And I think in our society, and especially the white supremacy culture, there's often this push to do things yesterday. And if we're doing things on time, we're actually kind of late. So slowing down has also been so important too.
I think for me, coming into 2021, I was trying to process 2020, as I'm sure many of us have tried to put words to what we've experienced. And I kind of landed in along this theme around gratitude, grace, and grief, right? And so thinking about, like, for me, like, I'm an optimist. I am, some people might say it may teeter on toxic positivity. I don't know. But I'm an optimist. And so, like, being able to be okay with being sad, being able to be okay with grief, and being able to, like, own that I have a positive vision for the future, right? Like, those things simultaneously. I think for me, when I'm, stressed, or when I'm, sad, or when I'm not feeling good, it definitely shows up in cloudy thinking. Like, I can't process. My higher level conscious functioning is not present in the ways that it needs to be, or that I would want it to be. And so I'm constantly checking in with myself, constantly, asking myself, what do I need in the moment, and trying to honor that to the best of my ability. And in the preparation session, we talked about going into a toolkit. And so one of the things that I've done, and I continue to do, is think about when I'm in a good space, right? Like, what are the tools and what are the rituals that I need to apply when I'm feeling great and when I'm not feeling so great. And some of that sometimes is just sitting with what I feel. I told the ladies during the preparation meeting that I like to get out and walk. And there was a time a couple of weeks ago where I had just gotten out of an early morning meeting, and I wasn't feeling it. I was exhausted. My brain was cloudy. I had a million things that I was trying to navigate. And I grabbed my headphones and I got out and went, got ready to go for my walk. And I was going to tune out, and my headphones wouldn't work, right? So I could either go back and get them, which was distraction, or I could just be present with what I was feeling, be present with what I was experiencing, and take that on my walk with me. So it's a bit of, mindfulness around what I'm feeling, and then really being willing to honor that, setting boundaries where necessary as well.
That really resonates. I was thinking about, I put in the chat, like, my executive function or ability to process the way I did pre-pandemic has just diminished significantly. And at first I didn't catch it. I was like, why can't I do like what I was doing? Why can't I, why is this so hard? I've heard a number of people say, y'all, I probably bought 50 books during the pandemic, right? Because we were all like, we got to read, Cass, we got to read, The End of Policing, we got to read. And I would get them and get started, and then just could not get it. I couldn't get through it. And I had to adapt ultimately to like a smaller amount of content to process, just because that's what my brain could hold. It felt like it was gonna blow up. I think the other thing that I just want to name is, even though we were home, I'm actually working more than I was when we were meeting in person. And I think we've developed these practices of back-to-back meetings. For me, as recent as yesterday, like first meeting, even though it was a personal matter, but at 7 a.m., last meeting, 8 o'clock at night. And that's primarily on Zoom or on a device, And I feel this level of exhaustion that's different. It's not like when you physically moved, it feels like more heady. And it's meant for me just feeling like a lot of disparate pieces. And a final thought there is like, when in the hell do you get all the work done from this 11 hours of meetings? Literally, like, how are we doing that? And don't get me wrong, I block times on my calendar, I, set aside, but I do all those things, productivity to all that, but still, legit, the Zoom fatigue, the mental processing, and the capacity. And that's what I mean when I say I'm not okay. What was happening, the story that was happening in my mind was, I should be able to do this. I should be able to operate in this way. I should be able to read this full book or what have you. And for me, this opportunity and others, when I've been able to say I'm not okay, are acceptance, right? It's like, no, I actually can't do it. And something you said in our pre-meeting, Allandra, or no, Camille, was I can't do it. And I say that unapologetically. I don't want to lose that, because you sort of preached in our pre-call, Camille, and I want to hear about these unapologetic behaviors. Do tell us, please, with all your sass.
I was trying to keep it chill because that was the vibe I was getting. I'm like,
no, ma'am, no, ma'am. You better come with. We got past it. We're past that mark.
Oh, okay. We got the intro out the way. No, so I was sharing, so as you know, as I was introduced, I'm a therapist. And so something that I do, and especially in the time of the pandemic, is, you know, I check in with myself before seeing clients. And if I'm not in the space to do the session, I will cancel it. And sometimes it's been 10 minutes before. It's like, hey, I'm not, you know, send an email, send a text. I'm not in the mental space to be present in the ways that you need and deserve. And we need to reschedule. And most of my clients are like, oh my God, thank you so much. Thank you for modeling self-care. But I feel no guilt about doing that at all, because I'm no good to my clients if I'm kind of just, yep, if I'm dissociated, and it's going to make me resentful over time. And I don't want to be resentful of the work that I love and am so passionate about doing. So yeah, cancel the meetings.
So when we were thinking about this, you know, it was important to me. So often our audience is comprised of leaders of organizations, and we've had a chance to kind of reflect on the individual and interpersonal not okay. But I would love, you know, a friend called me yesterday just sobbing. She's in a school district that doesn't have a mask mandate, that has some really conservative stances. And she described this like cognitive dissonance, like she has to go into that war, right? Literally, this is someone who's committed to educating our youth and has to worry about their livelihood, their life, right? Their health status because of the environment, and they're kind of stuck, right? You know, been teaching for a long time, you know, pension and this, that, and the third. So it's not as easy, you know, a family, they are a provider in that family, right? So it's not like just quit your job. You know, these are grown ass people that need to meet needs and pay bills. And so I want to just kind of, and so I use that to like, as a way to transition us to, my friend described this cognitive dissonance, right? So in that environment, and then back at home in a completely different community and environment. And they described feeling almost like, is it me? You know, am I like, is something wrong with me? Or, you know, or are we not okay? I guess to simplify. I'm thinking about this as this kind of, I remember this session last fall, we were trying to talk about reimagining work. And yet work doesn't seem to be changing for a lot of people. In fact, as I was just saying, in many ways, it's gotten worse. So I just want to talk a little bit beyond the individual and interpersonal to sort of institutional and structural I'm not okays, right? We're not okay. Camille, what are your thoughts on that? Like, what does that bring up for you?
Yeah, no, so I recognize that I'm definitely in a very privileged place, that I can cancel appointments, you know, pretty much at the last minute and forgo the money. And organizations don't have that flexibility because the work still needs to be done, as you said. And I'm often in these moments thinking about, you know, what are the things that are within our control that we can do to care for self, to allow for rest, right? So giving a Friday off, probably, well, news not going to shut down this Friday when y'all at the pool party turning up. So I often think about, and even just acknowledging that it's okay to not be okay. And that too, we don't always have to give 100%, 120%. And I let my clients know, like, what would happen if you just gave 80%, 70%? And that's okay too.
It's like we're being gaslit, Camille.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And I think that, when we make these really small individual changes, it ripples out, right? And so if everyone started, I'm curious, like if everyone I knew started really using them 3 weeks, the mandatory 3 weeks at the same time, that would signal to you, okay, something's going on. And then it may be like, we need to get 4 weeks, or we need to figure out what does our staffing need. So I think that there are things on an individual level we can do to enact changes at the organizational level.
Without divulging, what are some themes that are coming up with your clients? Like, what are you seeing with them in terms of not being okay? And then Allandra, kind of similar question, what are you seeing in your work?
Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of fatigue. And I work with mostly folks of color. So just a lot of what I call oppression fatigue. Just like, I'm tired, I'm over this. Climate change is real. We're going to be dead in 25 years. I see a lot of that. A lot of anger and feelings of helplessness and powerlessness. And a lot of that work that I'm doing with those clients is just kind of sitting with and being with, because I don't have a magical wand. It's not like I do this session and then go to like another planet where everything is good. I'm living in the shit too. So a lot of it's just kind of like, radically accepting, like, yeah, this is the reality. And like, these are the little things individually that we can do. And it fucking sucks. It sucks. Yeah.
It's funny, Camille, even for all the work that I do personally, when you said like, yeah, you give 70 or 80%, right? Like something stirred in me, like there's like a discomfort in saying that, right? Even though it's absolutely true. And I think it's such a part of how we're socialized. It's such a part of how, this society pushes us to produce and achieve. So I just had to share that. Like, I'm like, but I want to give 120, even when I don't have it to give, right? I think in the nonprofit sector, seeing a lot of folks who are just burned out, right? Like, and in particular, Black women colleagues who I work with who were already experiencing that prior to the pandemic. The pandemic has just elevated and accelerated some of that burnout. I think too, many nonprofits are always operating in a space of lack. And so during this time, as needs have increased, I'm privileged. I'm traveling, right? Like there's some folks who never left the front lines, never. They never started working from home. They've been there ensuring that the folks in the community have what they need, and they're exhausted and they're tired. I also see, a lot of leaders grappling with, you kind of shared up this time last year, we were talking about what returning to work looks like. And so, this very question of, it's okay to not be okay, how to support employees in the work setting around that. How do we return to the office in a way that is safe, but also takes into consideration where people are in their mental and emotional and physical well-being. That also takes into consideration other pressures that folks may be experiencing, whether it's taking care of parents or children, particularly as we talk about the challenges in the school system. So it really runs the gamut. But, by and large, people are struggling significantly and feeling a lot of pressure in this moment.
There's so much good stuff happening in the chat. Thank you, Allandra and Camille, for sharing what you've been sort of observing with folks. I want to bring us back a little bit to there was a really beautiful discussion during our planning meeting around what it means to feel our ancestors in our gut. And Camille, you said a lovely phrase, I'm not going to steal your thunder. But I think about what it means to hold on to that, especially in light of those external sort of expectations and competing commitments. How do you amplify that voice that you have?
So what Hamida is referring to, a line that she reminded me in the chat that I said, if I'm not feeling it, I ain't fucking with it. In the context to that was really feeling in my body and my gut when something just feels off, and really trusting that. And I think Yodit was like, just how do you know? And it's just like, my ancestors are in my gut, and I don't question that. I'm sorry, I just saw something in the chat. It is really hard for me to navigate chat and having a conversation. That made me giggle. But I've been realizing that if I just sit with and notice, my ancestors are always with me. They are giving me insight. They're giving me answers to all of these big questions. And the matter is, do I listen or not? Most days I don't. I'm getting better at that though. And I think that's the white supremacy culture that's like, no, like, you need to get back to work, you need to be busy, you need to help all the people, you need to take this opportunity, it's going to look good on your resume. When the ancestors are like, it'll be all right, and I'm like, but no, I have to I have to do that. And I realize if I just kind of sit with, then my answer will come to me. And sometimes I'm still taking the opportunities, for example, or other times I'm just like, I can't, I'll respectfully decline and say no. But yeah.
We talked about the book, The Body Keeps the Score. And when you mention, well, first of all, just shout out to our ancestors are in our gut. And Allandra, you talk a lot about embodied knowing. Hamida had actually shared that, like, our body is predictive of what we're doing or feeling. Some of that dysregulation you described, Camille. I was thinking about a book I've been drawing from. One of the few I have been able to read bit by bit is the 15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership. And one of the things that they talk about is embodied listening and embodied response. And so now I have learned and trained myself to notice that gut feeling. And I wonder if others are, or those tingles you get, it's not always a bad thing. Sometimes I call it like a Holy Ghost moment. You're in your flow and you get that body tingle. That notice from our body, I think, is the same as that gut feeling that you're talking about when it says stop, when it says rest, when it says cancel that meeting or don't go. And I've really had to work hard at giving myself permission in those moments to become embodied, to connect the story that's going on up here, right? The story of my worth and my work and producing, right? Versus my body saying, nah, sis, chill, right? And I feel like we're in a constant fight with those two dynamics, the culture of the hustle and grind culture that we're in, and the body knowing and the dysregulation that we're experiencing. So from a practical perspective, do either of you have some examples of embodied practices that serve you or tell you when you're not okay? And I'm thinking about how folks who are with us might also benefit from what you've noticed or what you've heard or learned, similar to the book, The Body Keeps the Score, which talks about trauma and its physiological manifestations.
Yeah, it's an innate knowing that it's hard for me to really describe, but I've learned to listen more. And I think, being in a space of like sadness or a space of fatigue or tiredness, right? Like sometimes we'll push through, your body will shut you down if it gets to a certain point, right? And I think that's one of the things that I've learned, and I don't want that to happen again. I've experienced that. So just really quick story. In October of 2020, I lost my grandmother suddenly and unexpectedly. And so this is the person who, most consistent person all my 40 years, devastating loss. Also a loss that ushered me in as the matriarch of my family, right? And so the night before she passed, I just taught a class at Oakland University, right? And I had a full day of work at COAC Detroit. And I had all these things lined up to do for the rest of the week. And y'all should have seen the crazy me who was planning memorial and acting as executor of a will and grieving as a granddaughter and all of that. Still trying to like run this organization, still trying to teach this class, right? And I hit a wall. Physically, mentally, emotionally, my body hit a wall. And I was like, I cannot do this, right? And so hitting that wall and not necessarily having control over that experience, right? Having control over how I felt and what I, being able to get up and do the things that I wanted to do. I was like, I don't want to do this again, right? And all of the warning signs were there. All of the things that I needed to listen to were there, but I didn't listen. And so for me, some of the practices that I, incorporate now for moments of stillness, I meditate every morning. It's part of my ritual for me to get centered, to be able to, just have stillness, right? I move my body a lot. And I'm not talking about, rigorous exercise. I mean, y'all probably walk 100 miles a month. I mean, I walk, right? And sometimes that's just moving the emotion through the body. Sometimes that's an opportunity to get centered, to synthesize, confusing thoughts. And so those are some of the practices, that I've incorporated. But I think what I've learned is that if you don't listen and if you don't take the time to give you what you're telling yourself you need, your body will be forced to listen. And that is not a fun place to be.
Absolutely. I think that's where some of my own health issues have come, Allandra, from not listening to my bodies. I'm like in the ER and I'm like, how did I get here? And it's like, oh, I was doing the most. And condolences to you and your family on the loss of your grandmother. I know that had to be hard. Some of the practices that I have, I try to just be still. Mentally too, because I'm always going and going and going and going. So taking time to be still, to notice what happens and comes up. Additionally, another like very practical thing I do, anytime someone has a request of me, I don't say yes immediately. Even if I have to give a breath to think about it, I'm going to give myself space to just even think about it, consider the request. And if there is urgency behind the request, I'm more likely to say no, because I don't no is definitely a complete sentence, because I don't believe in doing things haphazardly or impulsively. And I remember I had to turn down doing a presentation with someone because it was so last minute. And I was like, this is about internalized racism and white supremacy. Like my ancestors are going to be pissed if I put this shit together in a week. Now, can I? Yes, I can put it together in a week. And, I have a master's degree. Like I've done a lot of things at the last minute. So it's not a matter of can I do it, but I won't do it because, again, I'm not honoring my ancestors by doing something that's so important to me with so little time. So yeah, I would say those are the two things that I really focus on.
Thank you for that, Camille and Alondra. As you're both sharing about how you focus and listen to that inner voice, I think about some of the places and spaces that we might have been in that might have really compelled us or urged us to squelch or not listen to that inner voice or act in the opposite way. And sometimes that inner voice can get real quiet, right? Would love to hear from both of you in terms of how do you amplify that inner voice? How do you beef it up if it's sort of gone into hiding?
Um, I think a couple things for me. I mentioned meditation as a practice. That's a huge one for me. So I try to go back to basics when I can't hear that voice very clearly. I try to, sometimes it's self-isolation, right? And being able to just have space and time with myself. Sometimes it is, I'm an artist. So for me, sometimes it's music. It's, throwing on an instrumental and just letting the thoughts come. Without, I think I mentioned during the planning session, without necessarily creating something for public consumption, but just to be able to process what I'm feeling. So it's really kind of honoring, the things that I know in my toolkit help me to get to that point and help me to be able to hear that inner voice. I get in nature. So, that means getting near water and just being still, just listening. I get in the forest, which is so crazy to me, even as I think about the fact that that's something that I truly enjoy now. But I will literally just go and be in nature to be able to amplify that voice and to hear it more clearly.
Just thinking about how grounding nature has been for me as well, Allandra. So thank you for offering and sharing that. I know for me, when I have a voice that, is quiet or scared to speak, and I mentioned this in the planning meeting too, but just speaking to that voice and that part, right? Trying to better understand, how old is this part? For me, it tends to be like a very traumatized little young part. And so I can't talk to 4-year-old me the same as I would talk to me as a 31-year-old. So a lot of it's kind of like getting down and using the really soft voice and, 5-word sentences, no big words, and really trying to understand what they're saying and attuning to what that part needs. And then, empowering that voice to speak up, or it may be me stepping in like, wow, there's this part of us that's really sad right now, or that's really angry and wants to bust some heads right now. And, how can I do that? How can I do that in a responsible way, right? That honors this little girl inside that is furious, and also honors all of the other parts of me, right? The part of me that wants to maintain an image, the part of me that is compassionate. So I try to do a lot of kind of going within and having a lot of kind of internal dialogue with the various parts that are coming up. And being in nature while doing that helps too. So yes.
Yeah, the nature piece is so important because it feels like, Mother Earth giving us a big hug, right? Like, come on and come to what matters. I want to turn us a little bit as we begin kind of to wind down our dialogue and open up for, where do we go from here? There are two things that are on my mind. One is, as a cultural Christian, when I got married, we read from Corinthians, and lots of people know the passages about love being patient and kind. And the latter part of that scripture is that love suffers long. And in this context, I think about, this idea of normalizing not being okay. That rather than the right to comfort, which is also a function of dominant culture, and this expectation that I think even lures us into the transactions of self-care. Like, I get a massage, or I'll go to yoga class, or I'll, just listen to this podcast sort of thing. And all those things are fine, but they have been commodified and turned into something that's intended to make us better, to, get okay so you can come back in and produce, right? And that is this idea, this notion of being guaranteed a right to comfort or being okay is frankly a privilege. It's a first world demand for certain. I think some of us feel like, well, I should be okay. Hurry up, feel better, get back to work, get back in the game, and I am finding increasingly what a gift of the spaciousness of giving space, the spaciousness of sitting with my sadness or my pain or my not being okay. And so I wanted to just kind of invite folks in their own ways. I'm not trying to push any, but like, what does it mean to sit with the experience of long suffering? And we think about suffering as such a negative thing, but it isn't necessarily, right? The long suffering is that I'm with you, right? And I'm with you long and deep, and that it's okay, right? If you're not okay, I'm with you. So I want to just leave, kind of sit that there. And then the second thing that was on my mind, I told y'all I can't read a book, but I can read an essay. And I picked up this book. You might not be able to see it with my virtual background, but it's called Black Futures. And it's a series of essays, and that's why it's been easier to read. And there are two contributors, Cyree Jarrell Johnson and Carolyn Lazar, who identify as disability justice activists. And I just want to share this passage, and then I'd love to hear Allandra and Camille if anything resonates for you. But so they're talking about disability pride. And they note, so much of what disability pride is for me is not necessarily celebrating illness, injury, trauma, but a pride in our resilience. Disability and futurity appear to be incompatible in an ableist world. The general vibe is that disability, and I use that word loosely, is a bad thing, and we don't want it in our future. When non-disabled people, and I count myself, Yodit, among this until now, envision an ideal future, it's one in which disability no longer exists. They want to have found ways to eliminate all potential manifestations of disability through the miracles of technological advancement. Not only is it unrealistic, it's incredibly ableist. There's no possibility of a life which does not in some way produce disability. You cannot live in a world without getting hurt, going mad, or becoming sick. People long for life without disability, but the experience of just being alive and disability are so intimately bound up together. Especially, they write, for Black people. And for me, they say, dreaming of a Black disabled future is a radical practice. And it goes on, but what struck me in particular about the piece around futuring and imagining the future is that we do often dream of this future where we're all okay, where everything's okay. We, even in my activism and organizing, I dream of this liberated future, and not that we can't, but what would it look like for us to sit in the nuance and complexity of a future where we're not all okay or able-bodied or, happy, this utopia, but that we're all whole. We're seen as whole, we're valued as whole people, and we center and focus on what matters, which is our humanity, of course. It's not our work or our producing, et cetera. What comes up, y'all? Anything got your juices flowing there?
There was a big like, woo! that came up for me. Not sure if that was present for other folks in the space right now, but just like, wow. And I'm sitting also with kind of that first world demand to comfort and to everything being okay. And, it's often people get into a panic when they're not okay, when things aren't okay, their business isn't okay, their car isn't okay, whatever. And the reality, though, is that pain is inevitable. And I think that a lot of us, myself included, have grief around that. I know I do, because there is that part of me that just wishes that maybe if I read all these books and attain this knowledge, then I'll be okay. Or maybe, when I do this, and that's denial and bargaining. But I think a lot of us, and especially just the way white supremacy is set up in our culture, we don't want to feel pain. We do everything to avoid it. And we do that in the lives of others. We get them to avoid their pain too. We're like, well, girl, just look on, we silver line, look on the bright side. You have so much to be grateful for. Or, like, girl, I'm gonna take you out to eat, and let's just go out and let's just forget about it. When really it may be that we need to go through that pain to come out on the other side. And that's okay too.
Yeah, I think during our preparation session too, I struggled with this notion a little bit. Because I'm a problem solver, like I'm a solutionary. So, I want to fix it, whatever it is, if it's pain that someone that I love is experiencing, if it's pain that I'm experiencing, if it's challenges in society, there's a desire to make it right, however you define right. And I think what tends to happen is that we undervalue those perceived negative emotions, or and we overvalue the positive ones, right? And there is a lot to learn in that space. There's a lot to grow from in that space. But I mean, personally, it's something that I struggle with. There's a level of vulnerability that you have to embody and possess and own to be okay with being in that space as well.
How do you talk to kids about not being okay? What's that conversation? Maybe some people have thoughts even in the chat about that. How do we talk to young folks about this? Even if you didn't birth a child, we're a village, right? So how are we thinking about our young folks within that? And maybe not even kids, like I think of some, Alyssa just shared, and forgive me if I'm pronouncing your name wrong, but taking time when your mom transitioned, and my prayer is that you hold dear to memories that sustain you. But I remember when my mother passed, like there was no playbook for that. And I did not know how to ask for help. And so I suffered a lot. And I was 19, I wasn't 9, but I was 30 when she died. I was 19 when she got sick. But I definitely felt like I needed to like get back on the wagon and be okay, and move through it. And it had been a decade of grieving her alive, how do we reach back? I'm mindful that this is primarily an audience of adults, but like, where are younger folk, and where is our intergenerational commitment to this conversation?
I think for me, as I mentioned, I'm a momty, so I kind of teeter between mom and aunt to my nieces and nephews. And I think it's in actions and in words. And so, of course, I'm verbalizing like it's okay to be angry with me, or, you can disagree with me. And also, I got to practice what I preach. And so, if I'm telling my niece, like, it's okay to have a bad day, I got to have a bad day. She has to watch me handle that. She has to watch me not be okay. Right. Which I mean, that's something that I struggle with is having people, especially people that look up to me, respect me, see me as not being okay is hard. And I think that that's exactly the thing that my nieces and nephews need. They need to see Auntie Camille a little sick and see that I'm just watching Netflix all day and eating soup and, not doing anything. Because I know, I'm just thinking of how like smart my niece and nephew are. They would be like, well, why are you telling me that when you said you were sick last week, but you still had to work? And so it's one of those things where, verbalizing that it's okay to not be okay, and examples of what that can look like, and also modeling that for them as well.
I'm taking a moment to get caught up in the chat. There's so much good stuff there. Hope others are doing that too. You want to help transition us, Amita?
Absolutely. Sorry, the chat is just so. Thank you all so much for really sharing how you are engaging with little people. And Etta, I just want to uplift the example that you shared. Yesterday, you observed a teacher holding a very upset older toddler. Toddler would not stop crying. The teacher said, "You are safe. I'm here to help you. I can hear you're upset. It is not okay to hurt others. I am here. You are safe." And I think about what that power is to hear that, but also I think about what Camille was saying about talking to all of the parts of us, that little Hamida that might be hurting, what it means to really get down and share with that gentle voice, both with ourselves and for the young humans in our life. So to shift us a little bit, Allandra and Camille, I would love to hear from both of you, for all of us, for all of our betterment. What are asks, demands, invitations do you have of us, of the community, that really centers being okay with not being okay and healing ourselves and moving forward in a very whole way for ourselves?
Now, y'all kind of talked about the commodification of self-care, and how in a lot of ways it's become a buzzword in our society. And I think a lot about community care or collective care, and how we, take care of each other. And so there are a couple of invitations that I'd like to offer. The first is to spread compassion We never know fully what folks are grappling with or dealing with, doesn't always show up. And so just having compassion and spreading that compassion. Lifting up transparency and honest conversations. Kudos to Nu for your leadership in creating a space like this for us to even have this conversation, because it's not a regularly occurring conversation in our community. And then I would say normalize reaching out for support in your families, in your organizations, in your community. And if someone does reach out for that support, having empathy and compassion when they do.
I think for me, some of the invitations that I have are to one, allow and make space for softness. I think in this world, and as you know, Yodid and Allandra, and this is true for me as well, you know, there's being the Black superwoman, or even just being a superhero in general, right? So allowing and making space for softness, for gentleness, for tenderness, even, right? With ourselves, with others. Additionally, I want to invite folks to encourage themselves and really encourage others to take care of themselves. And if someone sets a boundary, respond with compassion. I think a lot of times we may be disappointed when someone cancels lunch or dinner or the coffee date with us. And instead of, you know, expressing that upset, thanking them for setting that boundary, for taking care of themselves. My hope with that is that we can normalize self-care and saying no. And then lastly, I invite folks just to be in community. So with their friends, with their family, in their respective organizations, with their neighbors, literally, but just to be in community. I don't think healing is going to come in isolation. I don't think it ever does, actually.
I want to ask us to sit in a few moments with what Camille and Allandra shared. Yodid, I saw you came off of mute, so go for it.
Oh, I wanted to share something with you. Do we have time? Do we have like 3.5 minutes? Okay. Okay, let me see if I can make it work, y'all. I think so. This is from a former Centering Justice speaker, Dr. Michelle Rodriguez. It's a quick video.
One of the things that I've noticed is that, number one, things are really hard right now for a lot of people. So I'm gonna kind of tell you one of the patterns I'm seeing, give you a quick strategy, and we're gonna be in and out of here. But a lot of us are navigating our kids returning back to school. A lot of us are navigating returning back to in-person work. A lot of us are having a hard time dealing with all of just the news and the difficult things that are happening out there. And it's a lot. And I don't think we do a good job of evaluating how much tough stuff we push through every day. So think about your week. Check in with like your level of what you've been adjusting to, what you've been pushing through. Because if we're going to coach ourselves well through things, we have to evaluate well, and then we have to give ourselves good feedback. So let's talk about these two pieces. So we're going through a lot. And we may be managing okay. A lot of us too, I work with a lot of high achievers, we may be making it look really good externally, but it's difficult. So let's name that number one. The other thing that we do, so we underestimate how much difficulty and adjustment we're doing. And then we overestimate how we think it's so easy to get it just right. We tell ourselves, I should be getting it just right all the time. So there's perfect, there's doing my absolute best, and we think we should be hitting that mark every day, all the time, and that's not realistic. You guys are amazing. You'll do that some days, and there'll be a lot of in between. So it's almost like there's this one mark of perfect, and everything below that we treat like it's trash. We treat like it's inadequate, and we talk to ourselves that way. And that doesn't help when we're already dealing with a lot of really difficult things. I will sometimes call this like our Mother Teresa to Hitler scale. So if we hit Mother Teresa like saint level, all-star, all tens, then that on those occasions we're nice to ourselves and we give ourselves a little tiny pat on the back, and then we make ourselves push again. And everything else we either make no comment about to ourselves or we're hard on ourselves. And in those in-between moments, we do so many important and good things. And it's hard to keep yourself motivated when you're not getting feedback about those things. So you guys know I love Tabitha Brown. And if you watch a Tabitha Brown video, you're going to hear her say a bunch of times in that video, very good. So the simple strategy that I want you to do this week is to tell yourself very good a lot. When you get out of bed and you're tired and you don't feel like it, but you do it anyway, I want you to tell yourself very good. When you do something 3 days in a row that's not easy, but you're being consistent and you don't see the benefits of it yet, tell yourself very good. You showed up. You did the thing consistently. Consistency matters. When you do the thing that's hard, but maybe not that great, you're not great at it yet, tell yourself very good. When you're irritated as all get out at somebody, but you don't pop off at your partner or your coworker, when you pause and take a breath and pick your words wisely, tell yourself very good. When you pause and just take a break, when at the end of the day you didn't check everything off your checklist, but you got some of those things done. You cooked, you cleaned, you took care of people, you went to work, tell yourself very good. I want to hear how you guys' week is going. I want to hear how you're evaluating yourself and how you're talking to yourself. Like this, share with somebody who needs to hear it. But most of all, try this just this week. If after that you're like, that was horrible, that's fine. But try it this week and come back and let me know how it goes.
Tell yourself, very good.
Yodi, thank you so much for sharing that. Very good. Very good for all of us that are showing up, that are present here, no matter what we're holding. Yes, thank you, Michelle Rodriguez. And we're all keeping going. So to transition a little bit more towards our closing, Carly's going to help us out by sharing, no, that's cool, I got it, by asking, we want to know how you experienced our time together today. And yes, we are, I see all the love for that link, and we're going to get that from Yodit and include that in our follow-up to folks. But we would love to hear how you experienced our time together today. So I'm going to include a survey here to let us know how you experienced us, what went well, what could be better. And to that end, throughout our time together, I was trying to piece together some of the real gems that were surfacing from our speakers, Camille and Allandra, from Yodit, and from all of you. So I'm going to share a little found poem that I wrote while we were together today. What myths can we break for our wholeness? Trust in yourself and what you feel and know you need. Listen to your pain, your ease, your joy. It's honest truth. Remember your strengths in the face of challenges. Decide what decisions you really need to make. No is a full sentence. Boundaries are the distance at which I can love you and me simultaneously. Speak in actions and words. Slow down and revel in gratitude, grace, and grief. Own your vulnerability. Be kind with yourself. Sometimes there's no processing power on hard days. Don't shoot on yourself. Define for yourself what it means to be free and whole. You don't always have to give 100%. 70%, that's okay. Move from surviving to thriving. You deserve bread and roses. Align your feelings, embodiment, and talk. Create your own safe space. Use your soft voice with yourself too. Surround yourself in nature. Our ancestors are in our gut. Trust them. You already have an innate knowing. If you're not feeling it, don't fuck with it. Want to thank you all so much for spending time with us today. Yodeep, was there anything else that you wanted to share? Oh, where'd Yodeep go? Truly, thank you all for spending time with us today. Yes, we will include that in the note. And this was a poem that we all created together from the chat, from speakers from everywhere else. So appreciated spending time with you. And we are going to close with a little bit of music. Carly, I'm